Hey everybody, welcome back to Avalon, episode 18. Today's episode we're going to work on the area directly underneath the main interchange coming into the city. So this area has been basically empty since the beginning of the project. I've kind of been putting it off, if I'm being totally honest, because there's just so many roads everywhere and it's going to be a pain to work in here. I already knew that coming into it. And on top of that, it is like the very front of the city, so I want to make it look good, obviously, which means that we're going to spend a lot of time working on this area. It's basically like a 2x2, 4-block kind of area, and that's quite a bit of space to fill. And I knew that, just going with full scale, like a building block thing was not going to work very well with all these roads in the way. So not only do I want to maintain the density and the scale of the buildings in this area, but I also have to be careful about all the roads that are sort of intersecting with this area as well. So what I kind of came up with was like an outdoor shopping mall area. It's all fit underneath the various roads, and it kind of worked out nicely because not only are we right across from the center point station, but we're also right alongside what's going to be the entrance to the underground park area, or the, I guess, sunken park area. So we need to eventually cut down into the ground and kind of build out the park, and then connect this over to our other park on the other side, like I think 2 blocks away or so. So there's like a 1-block underground walkway area that sort of pops in and out. There'll be some elevators that go from the main ground level down to the park, of course. And then this is sort of like a nice end point to the park right in the middle of downtown. So once you get out, I'm trying to expand out all these elevated walkways that connect over to these sort of nicer shops. I got these like super fancy boutique style buildings, I guess, like a Mac store, and I don't even know what the names of these. To be honest, I've never shopped at these stores in my life, but you can tell they're fancy because they're nice and clean looking and very modern, and they've got the fancy I'm sure it's very expensive. I've never been there before, but I would imagine. So anyway, you might notice something kind of cool going on here. Very briefly, I just plopped it a minute ago there, but I found a Salt Lake City assets collection. I've actually known about this for a while, but I hadn't checked back on it in a while, and it is like really fleshed out. I mean, there's a whole bunch of buildings in there. And I'm a Salt Lake City local myself, so I thought it'd be kind of cool to include some of these skyscrapers that, they don't look like super, like it's not as if when I plop them down, it's like, oh, that's Salt Lake City. I mean, if you live here, you'd probably recognize them, but I thought they fit pretty well in Avalon, and it's a nice little kind of shout out or recognition of Salt Lake City in a way. So we have the Wells Fargo building there. We also have one of my favorite buildings, which is the Walker Center, and that one's sort of off to the side. You haven't seen that one quite yet, but that one's got like the big blinky top piece. If you live in Salt Lake City, you might know what I'm talking about. It's like a big blinking tower at the top. It's kind of cool. So we got that one. We also have the Key Bank. It's a bank building thrown in here somewhere. It's pretty generic, so it doesn't really even stand out too much, but I threw those in because they're like moderate height and they fit kind of nicely in this area. Again, we're kind of beginning this fall off in the height of the skyscrapers, so it sort of fit to have these buildings. But then underneath all these buildings, I wanted to have a nice little outdoor shopping center. And the nicer part of it is definitely the area right across from our metro station there, because again, we have to expand the metro lines out as well. And then, as you get away from that and towards the underground parts of the, or not underground, but underneath all of the highways that we're working on right now, I kind of like the idea of having this really dense kind of marketplace with all these little like 3-story buildings sitting underneath. And I try to keep it nice looking and still kind of a nice area, but it's got like a lot more advertisement, a lot of industrial vibes in certain areas that sort of make it all feel very cozy and tight. And I kind of like that. So you'll see later on what I'm talking about when I reference all of the advertising, but it's definitely got a lot of personality, which I like a lot. And I think it fills the space nicely underneath all of these highways. It definitely makes this whole area feel very chaotic, which of course I'm always a fan of. So one thing that I want to sort of talk about, and it's something that I've started to realize the more that I've done this project, and it might be useful for some of you guys who are also considering doing large city builds. It's definitely worth your time to plan out all of your metro lines, plan out all of your public transit, do all that stuff before you start building a lot of your city. If you're playing in sandbox mode, obviously. If you're not playing in sandbox mode, that might be a bit of an undertaking in terms of expenses. But if you're playing in sandbox mode like I am, it's certainly worth planning out the routes first and then building around the routes, which actually happens in real life quite a bit. So it's not necessarily unrealistic to build it in that way as well, but it is so much harder to put all this stuff in afterwards. Like, seriously, it's so annoying to dig around all the stuff you've built to add in metro lines and add in elevated walkways. It's something that I have started to realize is going to be a problem in some of these downtown areas. Now, fortunately, I already did most of that work before I put it all down, so it's not like the end of the world, but it's something that I'm seriously going to keep in mind whenever I start expanding the city outwards. What I'd like to do in what'll hopefully be the next episode, maybe 2 episodes from now, when we start expanding all of the infrastructure again, I'm going to just go ahead and like build out a bunch of roads, build out the metro lines, and plan out where things are going to go ahead of time, and then start building up the city on top of that. That way we have like a really solid network of metros and everything's sort of planned out, and I don't have to worry about digging underneath my existing builds to place all of those in. So definitely keep that in mind if you're going to do something like this in the future, because this is like, it's very difficult to dig underneath all the stuff you've already built. It's not a very fun experience. But anyway, another thing that I want to point out is, you might have already noticed, but I plopped down a couple animated billboards, and this is now possible with the additive shader mod. And also I think there's another mod called like Anim UV or something, but these 2 mods make it possible to make animated billboards now in the game. I think that was a Ronix mod, so definitely look at that if you want to see some animated stuff. I've seen additive shader used to make like holograph stuff, which is also super cool. There's not a lot of stuff on the workshop yet using this, and if it is, it's not necessarily all billboards. A lot of it's other stuff as well. So firstly, huge shout out to Off, OFFE, on the workshop. He reached out to me a little while ago asking if I wanted any assets, and of course, the first thing in my mind was like, yes, I would love to have some more billboards. I've been kind of talking about this on and off, and a few of you guys have also made some billboards. Big shout out to King Leno, who publicized all of his, I think they were like billboards for like a Las Vegas set or something. I already talked about him in previous episodes, but those were super awesome as well. But if any of you out there are asset creators and you'd like to try and play around with the additive shader or the Anim UV assets and create some animated billboards, I would love to use them in Avalon. So, feel free to play around with that. And if you do, shoot me a tweet and send me a link to your stuff on the workshop. I would love to throw them in. In particular, it would be awesome to have some really big billboards. The one that I just plopped, that big Coca-Cola billboard, is like the medium-sized one, like right in front of the Wells Fargo building. We're sort of in like a unique situation in that Avalon is like very Blade Runner-esque. It's not even just like, large-scale city. It's like megacity scale. So, think things in Blade Runner, like there's just like these absolutely massive holographic animated billboards that are like literally the size of buildings, like gigantic. There are some versions that Off made for, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, OFFE. It seems like Off, I don't know, but sorry if I'm not. But anyway, he made some really big ones on top of the ones that I already plopped that are like the scale of buildings, and I would seriously love to have some more animated billboards of that scale. So if you're up for it and you want to send some links on Twitter, I would love to see it. I'm just like the Fluxtrance on Twitter, not Fluxtrance, but the Fluxtrance. Someone took Fluxtrance. Long story, don't worry about it. But yes, please tweet me if you do that. I would love to see. And then hopefully we'll have some more big, large-scale billboards in the future. I also might try and play around with it myself and see if I can make some custom stuff in the workshop in that realm. There is one more thing that this Off guy made for me. He made a large Avalon logo. It's just like the AVA logo, and I'm planning on putting that on the big like main Avalon tower that we built in like the 6th episode. I don't know. I forgot what episode we built that in. I think it was the 9th episode. But that massive Avalon tower, I want to have a big Avalon logo at the top of that. Unfortunately, I think during the export process, some stuff got messed up because it's only visible at night. It doesn't have any like mesh that actually stays on during the day. So I don't know if he's really keen on like updating it, so I might do it myself at some point, but that is one thing that I want to throw in as well. So I'm kind of guessing that after the infrastructure episodes and we start expanding out, I might do a single episode where I go back into the downtown area and try to just like add in tons of massive billboards and really start getting that like neon animated billboard vibe going on, especially in the big commercial areas in the downtown. So that should be coming as well. Keep that in mind. But if you want to be a part of it, if you want to have your stuff featured in Avalon, definitely let me know on Twitter if you make something, and I'd love to check it out and hopefully throw it into the build. But all that aside, let's get back to the build a little bit. I've been kind of rambling about all this kinds of stuff. But now I'm kind of filling out the area underneath this big looping kind of highway section that gives access to our cargo freight terminal. This area was kind of hard to work with, honestly. There's just not a lot of space for any kind of building, and it's sort of also at the end of the park, so I felt like it was kind of fitting to have a bunch of trees and natural green space in here as well. So I went ahead and did that. You can see that I'm really making a solid effort to connect all of these pedestrian paths in as many ways as I can so that, you know, we have some walkability. I feel like I should go back and address this, actually. I've gotten like a million comments now where people are like, man, you said you're going to make this so walkable, and this is like the least walkable city you can imagine. And I totally agree with you. I completely understand. I started this project out and I was like, I'm going to have a million, you know, elevated walkways, and I tried to connect them all together. And I'm starting to realize now that when I started expanding the city, there was just so many buildings I wanted to put down, and I wasn't focusing enough on having walkways. I think that what this is going to end up being is like a semi-walkable city, in the sense that there will be metro stops between all of the walkable areas, and then the areas that are walkable will be the areas that are very commercial. So we have these big commercial zones with lots of, you know, big open walkways in between the blocks. Then we'll have the metro lines that connect all of them. So in theory, you know, you can get around with public transit and walking, but maybe you can't necessarily just walk across the whole city easily without crossing streets, which, you know, in most cities that's pretty good, right? That's already better than a lot of cities in the US. So I'm not like, you know, I'm not too concerned, but I do totally understand all the comments about this not being the most walkable city ever. And compared to cities in Europe, and I'm thinking particularly like the Netherlands, where they have like literally like highways of bike paths and stuff, like we're not at that scale really, but I'm okay with that. I think this is a pretty solid compromise. So, you know, that's that, I guess. I wanted to address that because I felt kind of bad. It seems like a lot of people were like, what? This is the least walkable city you could have made. Like, what do you... So there you go. That's sort of where we're going in terms of walkability. But the last thing I want to talk about is this cool structure here. I had this idea after I was kind of connecting some pipes and creating some, you know, above building industrial pieces. I was like, you know, a lot of these areas that are very skinny and narrow and are between highways are pretty prime for advertising, but we can't really fit any buildings in here. I'm not going to put them on the buildings themselves. So maybe we'll just have some advertising structures that are like kind of sticking out and jutting out around the highway. So this was like a prototype of that. I think it went all right. I could have maybe done it differently. And I think that after this one, I tried to play around with some different styles, and it took me a minute to kind of get this looking the way I wanted it to, so it looked like a natural, you know, structure that just holds billboards, and it wasn't like just like a big square thing. So you'll see in a little bit kind of the end result of this, but I used a lot of variants of this to just kind of fill out some empty space with more advertising. This is a very prop heavy thing to do, and I realized that afterwards. In fact, a little update on the prop usage so far. I think we're at 17,000 props right now of the total 65,000. So I'll be honest with you guys, that makes me a little bit nervous. That is a lot of props for not a lot of space filled so far. And again, you know, going back to what we said earlier, this is certainly the area where I want to utilize as many props as possible. It is the downtown area and like kind of the focus of the city. So I don't mind using a lot of props here, but I'm really planning on dialing it back in some of the expansive areas where we're going to hopefully kind of fly through and add lots of dense apartment blocks and, you know, things like that will allow us to use less props and still expand and detail out lots of the city and give us that density that we're looking for. So anyway, we are right at the end of the episode now, so I hope you guys enjoyed this one. We'll come back next time, possibly for an episode and a half, so we can work on the park that we didn't really get to finish all the way. And then I think that next week's episode, which is the regularly scheduled episode, should be the first episode of our infrastructure expansion. So we're going to have maybe a highway episode and then maybe a transportation episode that I've been kind of teasing for a long time now. And then we'll go from there. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.